there's nothing wrong with a sine wave. A sine wave makes for a good drum tone, particularly if you mix it with a little noise. Just put in like 10% noise. Mix it right in there. Even less. So that's one option. Another option would be to shape this wave, for instance, using the clip. We know that ordinarily the cycle is oscillating from 1 to -1 or -1 to 1, but we can clip it to some other value. So we'll start with the default values, clip from -1 to 1, which is going to have no effect. That's just going to allow it to pass through. But with a couple of floating point number boxes that we presumably also want to save into the preset. So we'll attach those to the preset. We can change those clipping values. Quickly filigree those presets. Doesn't have to be precise, just so it doesn't mess up the screen quite so much. And try out some different clipping values here. And obviously you may want to see what you're doing with these clips. So you can just use a scope tilde. You're always looking for ways to see what you're doing. You're always looking for ways to make it easier. Let the computer do more work for you. Let it show you what clip does, because it will show you exactly what clip does. So we're starting with the default values, -1 to 1. And as we clip this wave, watch what happens to it. Right? And we're hearing the timbre change because we're chopping off the tops and the bottoms of that sine wave. And so again, a couple things we're realizing. We can't smoothly transition between these because they're clicky. So we can use this same structure here. And you can use this a lot. You can use this all the time, just for a little bit of smoothing. And obviously these are floats, not integers. And it looks obviously like we're getting to the point where we're going to need to encapsulate again. And the problem is we have a preset up here and we can't encapsulate anything that's connected to the preset because it will break the connection to the preset. So we'll get to that in a second, but the solution is there. Don't encapsulate the stuff that's connected to the preset, and you're all good. So let's hear this. Let's hear these transitions. So now each of my presets has a timbre created by the clip along with everything else. I think The only other thing well, before I add anything else, my screen is full, so I need to do some encapsulation. So how do I encapsulate this in a sensible way? Well, here are my numbers that are connected to my preset, these two, and these two, and this function. So I want to leave all of that stuff outside of the encapsulation. So what am I going to encapsulate? I don't want to encapsulate this case slider because I like that visual feedback. I can certainly encapsulate all of this stuff. I can encapsulate that. The button. Let's try that. And this is something you probably haven't been doing. But this is the very common way to encapsulate. I left the stuff that's connected to the preset outside, which is also my user interface stuff. So I'd want it outside. I don't want to have to do necessarily what I do with cycles, jump into the subpatcher in order to manipulate things. I mean, it's fine, it's not an error, but here, this is actually more common. I've left my controls outside the subpatcher to clear up my screen space, and inside the subpatcher is my messy bit. And you can also optimize this a little bit. Like I don't like how it arranged the inlets. I want this to be over here on the left, and yeah. And notice what happens in the parent patch when I move these around. It actually jumps the connections. So that makes more sense to me. I know that values less than -1 or greater than 1 don't make any sense here. So of course, you know, you almost always go in and put some minimums and maximums. So now this goes between 0 and -1, and this goes between 0, or actually I put in a minimum of 0.01 and 1. So now I've got a pretty controllable situation here that I got to through just thinking about, you know, what the objects take in and what they put out. That sine wave with the bottom clipped off like that, that's a very, very video gamey sound. So I'll just throw in a couple other thoughts. One is that U-menu and preset work nicely together. The left outlet of U-menu doesn't send the text of the menu, it only sends the item number. And it's a zero-based list. So if we do +1, and then I can go into the inspector for my number box and edit the menu items. And here I can say 1 video game sound, 2 other sound, 3 tone sound, 4 harsh sound. And now I can use this menu to switch between my presets. One other thing that I'll show you is close bang, which I discussed briefly. Close bang only works inside of a subpatch, but it's very handy. Let's say I'm going to take all these presets that I've got here, and I'm just going to save them in the second row. So recall preset 2, save it down here. Recall preset 3, save it down here. Recall preset 4, save it down here. And then I'm going to clear these first 4 presets. One, 2, 3, and 4. Commas in message boxes just send the messages sequentially, so that's how I clear the first 4 presets. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to add a close bang that will store preset number 1 whenever I close this subpatch. It's kind of like making an autosave or an undo. And I'm reserving slot number 1 in my preset for this purpose. So obviously I'm going to need to do the same thing on my preset up here. So as soon as I close this window, see right now number 1 is unsaved. If I make some changes and close the window, when I reopen it, preset 1 has been saved with whatever the state of these numbers was when I closed the window. So here I'd need to do the same thing. I'm going to recall preset 1, save it in 5, recall 2, save it in 6, recall 3, save it in 7, recall 4, save it in 8, or whatever. Again, I'm improvising here. This is not I'm not showing you a technique. I'm just sort of following the thread of my own thoughts. And I'll do that same thing. I'll clear 1 through 4. And then watch this trickery. I'm going to go into my P cycles and have this store 1 be sent out an outlet so that every time I close this window, it's also going to store this preset. Right, I made an outlet to P cycles that sends the store 1 message here. So I can recall preset 5. Recall preset 6. Go in here, edit some values. All I do is close this window. It'll store in preset 1 here and store in preset 1 there. And now I've got that saved in preset 1. If I like it and I want to keep it, I then need to recall preset 1 and save it someplace else, like in preset 9, because the next time I open cycles and change it, it's going to overwrite preset 1. So you could see, you could start to build quite interesting saving structures just using the functions of preset that you're already aware of. And of course, you can keep going with this. Again, what are we? We're about an hour. It's about an hour of work, and we have something that's starting to get interesting. How many more layers of decision making is this going to take? How much more improvisation is this going to take before it gets to a point where we're like, this is really a piece or a component of a piece or a sketch or something that I really like the way it is. Like one thing that comes to mind immediately is it would be nice to make things slide around a little bit. It'd be nice to have some portamento on the pitch and some slide on the position. Portamento is just another line object. And this is why I used MTOF tilde, because I want a smooth transition between pitches. So instead of the sig object, which just converts my number into a signal, I'm going to use the line object, which will convert my number into a signal. And when the number changes, it'll change over a period of time. So pack integer, and let's say, well, we'll change it externally. Pack an integer and a float. I'll make a new inlet to my patcher here. And you can name these inlets as well, because once you start getting a bunch of them, you'll lose track of them. So you can go to your inspector and add a comment. Call it slide time. Put that into the pack. And now when I mouse over the 5th inlet, there's the label I created, slide time. And why am I doing this? Why am I creating an inlet? Because my preset is outside my subpatch. Should name this. And I'll make a number box. And this can be an integer number box. I mean, even though I specified float in the pack, it doesn't matter. We're dealing with milliseconds here, so you really don't need more than integer. Save that into the preset. Dim that patch cable down. And give it some slew amount, like 50 milliseconds. You can hear that a little bit. Let's make it more extreme. Make it 75 milliseconds. So now my preset 5 has a portamento in it and my preset 6 doesn't. And I can do the same thing with my image position here using the best object would be beeline, because beeline will keep us in sync with our frames from the jit.world. So beeline takes a bang, which we can use the middle outlet of jit.world to drive it, and we'll pack with some ramp time. And now, because it's beeline, this is going to be in frames. So we want to specify our frame rate here. But turning off display link if you're on Mac, and setting your FPS to whatever you want to. And so if we want this to be a 6-frame slide, this needs to be a float. Let's make it a 2-frame slide. 3 frames. Need a faster frame rate. Yeah, because that arpeggio is moving quite quickly, we need a faster frame rate in order to be able to see those slides. I'm just going to also just throw one more thing in here, which is how to use reverberation, how to use C-verb. C-verb gives you 100% wet reverb, so you don't just stick it in line. That's not going to sound nice. You have your dry signal, and then you add a little bit of reverb to it. So I'm adding a little bit of wet reverb to my dry signal. See, even that almost sounds like too much. Can make it a little longer and juicier than that. Yeah, that's nice. And one thing to note about C-verb, it says here that your reverberation time in milliseconds can be set with a signal or a float, and it's serious about that. It will not convert an integer into a float. This will not work. A message box with an integer will not work. It will not change the reverb time. It needs to be a floating point value. Okay, so that's it. One would keep going from here. Like, this is not a stopping point. This is we're getting into interesting territory here. So this would be the first draft of something that was going to develop further. So I hope this is useful, and I'll see you soon.